Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Rashkin Report, and this is Yuri Rashkin. Thanks to everyone who is supporting this channel on Patreon. You are my heroes. Patreon is a platform that allows you to support worthy projects such as this one and others. And I'm excited to welcome to the program today Professor of Moscow School of Social and Economic Sciences, and I'm sure I didn't get it quite right. But Professor Grigory Yudin, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. Just call me Greg. That's much more simple.
All right, Greg. Greg it is. All right. We had several questions that were submitted actually via Patreon, and there's other questions to ask as well. Professor Yudin is very active, I think, in university, but also at this point in the social scene that is existing in Russia and in Moscow. So with that in mind, you are sociologist. How do you see popularity of Vladimir Putin? Where do you see the division in his support? Does it lie along the age parameters, or is it because you have Moscow and St. Petersburg and other large cities who are maybe not supporting him, but small towns are supporting him? Or is the line cuts across maybe the socioeconomic level where you have the relatively rich versus the relatively poor? Or is it people who are on the state budget and support? Which of these parameters do you see as most relevant?
Well, indeed, some divisions or even cleavages have emerged. I think back in 2018, because before that we had a relative homogeneity in Putin's support across various groups. But since 2018, there are two major cleavages among two major axes, which are in turn correlated. One of them is the division over the age, which pits the elderly people against the rest. The support for the president is concentrated in the among the elderly people, 55 or older, or particularly 65 and older. These groups, I think they tend to authorize any kind of action for the president. They give him unconditional mandate, and they, of course, tend to show up at the elections. And that gives them increasing weight. Beside the fact that even demographically, they constitute a large parts of population. With the middle-aged groups, particularly with the young people, the situation is very different. They tend to be not, if not opposed, then at least tired of Vladimir Putin's 20 years rule. And for that reason, they are kind of looking for political alternatives right now. And in 2018, 2019, and 2020, and even now in 2021, we can see that all major events in Russian politics, they generate opposite reactions among these groups. So the elderly people and the rest. This is one of the cleavages. The other one is between those who tend to watch the TV, which is, of course, completely state-controlled in Russia, and tend to stick to the worldview promoted and produced by the major chains. So these people are opposed to those who use the multi-channel mode of, they are engaged in a multi-channel mode of consumption. They, besides TV, they use social networks to get a sense of what is going on in politics. They use Telegram channels, YouTube blogging, and with these multi-channel groups, the situation is again different. And these two axes are, of course, correlated because the elderly people are, of course, more dependent on the TV chains, whereas the middle-aged generations, the middle-aged people and the younger generation they are more likely to be less dependent on TV, and of course the youngsters, they don't watch TV at all. They don't even have a TV set.
How do you see your students responding to the protests that have been happening all across Russia throughout over the past month? Had to do with Alexei Navalny coming back and being immediately arrested. Not to mention that your students are some of the best and brightest in Russia. How are they responding to this?
Well, thanks for these words. I I don't really talk too much of politics with the students, just because it is our commitment to have these things separated.
I am not
University
saying
is a
you're
place.
politicizing them. I'm saying, are they saying something to you? Are you hearing attitudes? Like, what is their point of view?
I'm just saying that we tend to analyze politics with them, to study politics with them, to understand politics with them. But like discussing everyday politics is not something that I would really want to do. But having said that, obviously I can see that they are also part of this generation, which is really tired Vladimir Putin and his elites. Uh, for for this part of Russian society, well, if we are talking about my students, they are 24, 22, 24 years aged people who either moved to Moscow or they are Muscovites, and they have good education in social sciences. Well, the prospects for them are, I would say, quite dim. And they tend to understand that. They have a lot of ambition. They have a lot of willingness to contribute to life of the country. What they're seeing is they don't have much of perspective before them. They face the people who are obviously less qualified, who tend to regulate social life with bans and prohibitions, and that of course irritates. And for that reason, of course, they are much more likely, of course, to support Alexei Navalny than Vladimir Putin.
All right. And then, as we can see, even though there was some talk about real teenagers and high schoolers being involved in protests, it sounds like it's been more of a traditional protest crowd, in a sense that it's young people in their 20s that make up most of pretty much any protest worldwide for physical reasons. So I would imagine some of those are your students, and you know that they're being kicked out of school for that, frankly. What are they hoping for? Why are they going out there? Is this, there's some people who cynically will call this basically provocation to get some good people into trouble. How do you view this balance and the role that, what are they hoping for?
Well, at this point, there's a kind of constitution of a political subject, and of course, the only way for them to manifest this political subject is to get out on the streets. There's not much opportunity in Russia to do that, to present yourself, to get represented, to get visible. So that's one of the options left here. And for that reason, they of course want to constitute a political subject. It would be perhaps premature to say that it is already constituted, but without those manifestations, I mean, we have to compare them with like total silence. Well, total silence is, of course, much worse in terms of constitution of political subject. What they are doing now is trying to make it visible, and they actually succeed in that, because those manifestations that we had over these 2 weeks had happened across the country in, I guess, 180 cities, which is a lot. It is absolutely unprecedented in Russia, and that creates a kind of communication between cities. because Russia is extremely centralized country. I don't know if your audience is aware of that, but well, this is the largest country in the world, first of all. And then 90% of the resources, excuse me, I cannot hear you.
I understand people will say, I know Russia is a big country. Okay, but then you'll say they have, 11 or 12 time zones. Wow, time zones. Go ahead. Big
Yeah,
country.
this is extremely big. I mean, it's really big. And then you have to have in mind when you hear that 90% of the resources, 90%, is concentrated in one single city called Moscow. And if you add St. Petersburg to that, that almost totally sucks out all the resources available in the country. So this kind of movement, it already creates a kind of communication between different cities, where they can see each other, where they can feel each other, they can understand that they are not isolated, that there is a movement from below across the whole country. And some of those cities, they've been shown, I mean, that's really impressive. If you take a city like Vologda or Tver, with 1 or 200,000 of inhabitants, and you have 2 or 3,000 protesters on the streets there, that's like huge. So this is the step to make them visible. Now the question is, what is going to be built on that? But this is something we're going to see.
I have to ask you, do you see that these are connected to Navalny? Because now the state power seems to have finally embraced Alexei Navalny, who they ignored for years. And now they're like Navalny everything, but obviously it's not good Navalny. So are these protests connected with his supporters? Or is it bigger than that?
At this point, Navalny is rather representative for the demands that they're trying to voice. I think he's on the rise now, because up until last summer, a large part of the Russian population, up to half of the Russian population, was actually totally unaware of who Navalny is. Even though he has been active for like 12 years before, or maybe even 15 years. So he was literally non-existent for large portions of Russian population. Now, because of that terrible poisoning, he emerged as a political figure, as a political leader, and people kind of try to, well, they get interested in him. And seeing his defiance, seeing his readiness to fight for the country in the country, they kind of try to build the bridges between their own demands and what he is doing. So at this point, for those who are part of this movement, I think they are still evaluating him. Most of them feel a lot of compassion to him, but generally they kind of evaluating him. And for that reason, when you go on those protests and make a quick poll, and most of them would say, well, I tend to approve of him, but I'm not like really his fan or his supporter. So these are things that are in the making right now. Navalny is building his image and his constituency right now. Obviously, he has successfully targeted the demands that are out there even without him, and those are the demands for greater equality in the country, for self-governance, for justice, for more just distribution of resources, for careful attitude to the environment. So those are basically the resources, the demands that he connects.
All right. Greg, let me ask you this. When protesters go out, they're met with force. That force comes from representatives of state, whether it's state police, state National Guard, state whatever. And it's brutal because these people, the protesters, are unarmed. They raise their arms, say, we're unarmed. And in response, they get beaten up worse. Um, what is the dynamic there? And why are representatives of this, what motivates people that are representing the power in Russia? What is their motivator? And what are protesters hoping for? Are they hoping that these police is going to join them? What is how does this calculate it out?
Well, if we are talking about the ordinary members of the National Guard, they are not motivated by anything but command. This is just a matter of command. And I think it's going to get more brutal. And in this sense, I think the example of Belarus, of the events that have been happening in Belarus in 2020, are a kind of role model for what is going possibly to happen in Russia. Because in Belarus, it was obvious that in August there will be a clash, and Alexander Lukashenko has actually spent 2 months on putting the guard in barracks and making them extremely angry and furious. Putin didn't have this opportunity because of this blitzkrieg from Alexei Navalny, but he will have this opportunity, and I'm sure he will seize on this opportunity. So there will be command, they will be furious, and they will get much brutal than what we have seen up to that moment. As for the protesters, well, they're not. I wouldn't say that they are so naive as to think that the police is going to join them, at least at this stage. But there's a lot of courage and defiance, and some of them are really desperate. Some of them are experiencing the situation as well. You know, for a long time, Navalny himself used this. I don't know where he has taken it from probably from some movie, but he used the slogan, "This is the final battle between the showdown between the good and the neutrality." So this is perhaps what these people, some of them are not even big fans of Navalny, but this is what they're experiencing right now. They're feeling that this is probably the last chance to stop the train, to prevent what is going on now in Belarus. And for that reason, sometimes they are willing, they are ready to risk their lives or at least their health. I get a lot of feedback right now from the people who have been detained or beaten up. I honestly haven't heard of a single person saying, "Well, probably that's the last time for me. Probably that was enough. I'm not going to join that anymore." No, there's a lot of enthusiasm, even from the people who got beaten up, like their arms or legs broken. They are in hospitals now, and they're saying, "Well, let me recover."
What does that tell you?
That tells me that, in contrast to what we've been witnessing for long years here, at this point, it might be pretty close to the showdown. Because, well, if you compare that to Putin has survived a series of protests, the most important of them, of course, in 2011, 2012. But those were mainly led by the people who obviously had too much to lose. And they actually betrayed their constituency. Now,
one of those people,
the people who did that,
right? When they said, "No, we're not going to take over Kremlin. We're going to peacefully figure this out," and the wave went.
I mean, you need the names.
Right. I mean, wasn't Navalny involved in that process already back then?
Navalny was actually a pretty radical part of this process. He kind of tried to navigate, but he was mostly among the radicals. not probably on the extreme radicals who wanted to storm the Kremlin immediately, but he was part of the more radical faction of
All right.
this movement.
So you think this
But
is getting
people like
closer to showdown now?
Vladimir Ryzhkov or Boris Nemtsov, at that point, they made it quite clear that they are happy to gain some influence inside the system rather than changing that. Now, I think it is different. Now, what we're seeing both a different type of leader who is defiant, who is not willing to stay abroad, who is willing to change the country from within, and he is willing to risk his life. And he makes it absolutely clear that he is ready to risk his life. He's consistent in that, and that of course has a lot of impact on the followers, on the constituency, on the people in the movement, and they in turn realize that probably it's not we don't have any more time to give up or to temperate. This is probably pretty close to a showdown.
What is a showdown?
There's going to be a real clash.
Like a movie and like Alamo, and they like come out and like clock strikes noon. I mean, what are we talking about?
We're talking about a clash between very, very different visions of what kind of country Russia is. And these two visions are now being crystallized in those segments of population that I've described earlier. One of them is really conservative, and basically it is about like staying or keeping it as it is, with late Soviet years being the role model. I would say late Soviet years plus the consumer society. This is something you've got here under Putin, and this is probably one of his ideals. I mean, you can see it clearly in the movie filmed by Navalny. His tastes are developed in this environment, in the late Soviet environment, who has been jealous about the consumer standards in the West. Now he has both, and he's happy with that. And he doesn't want any change. He actually wants the time to stop. And his constituency supports him in that. And we have a very different constituency that is looking for alternative, that is looking for a different image of the country, doesn't want to get isolated from the rest of the world. It believes that Russia has to play a key role in solving the global problems. That Russia is actually not, it's a big power and has to be productive. It has to provide solutions, and not only the problems for the whole world. And they kind of envision a different kind of society. I was one of our studies demonstrated that among the younger generations, among the middle-aged, particularly among the young generations, the role model is not the late Soviet Union, but rather the Northern Europe. The countries where we have a lot of you have capitalism.
Everybody likes Norway. Everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Norway, Sweden, maybe even Germany. You have respect. You have respect for the others. You have respect for the weak. You have respect for the environment. You have more equality. You have participation.
I think respect is the really important word here.
Yeah, but equality is also important. Just because the level and the external side of inequality in Russia, it's infuriating. It's just devastating for many people who are living. This is one of the reasons why the protests got outside of Moscow. It's actually not as visibly seen in Moscow, where people got used to protest, but in other cities. I mean, that's when you see all this luxury in Putin's palace, that makes people feel like really deprived of what they deserve. And that's also part of the image that you're trying to project. So there's going to be a clash between these two visions. when somewhat exaggerating, you can put it as the past versus the future. But that's, of course, an exaggeration.
And it's interesting that you would say that, because from my observation on internet, a lot of people holding signs outside of Moscow, signs are saying Putin is a thief, which has nothing to do with Navalny, which, I mean, not directly, granted, but I mean, it's not free Navalny, it's Putin is a thief. So in conclusion, in all of these things you have mentioned, I kind of appreciate the fact that you never mentioned responsibility of the Western society, because I do believe that, as the Russian expression says, rescuing of the drowning is the business of the people drowning, first of all. And I think it's wonderful that you're discussing all these things that Russian people can do to improve situation in Russia. Do you feel that there is a productive role for the Western society to play in this play?
Well, first of all, I think this is also a very important difference of this movement that is nascent now from the previous movements. Because now there is, I think, more or less clear understanding that it is on us. It is on us, and we have to do it by ourselves. And this is the message given by Navalny himself. He doesn't really count on Western leaders. Now he's a global politician. His name is known worldwide. He has spoken to some Western leaders, but that doesn't make him believe that there's the West outside to save us. And I think the movement is pretty much clear about that. Well, I think that at this point, actually, right now, as we are talking, I think there's a major event happening now, because the representative of the European Union, Borrell, is now in Moscow, and he has requested a talk with Navalny, who is now in prison. Not only he is not granted this talk, apparently. He's going to stay until tomorrow, but apparently he's not going to be granted this talk. But 3 European diplomats are being kicked out of the country precisely at the moment when he is in Moscow. So that's of course an insult to the European Union, a clear insult. And I think that the usual rhetoric about human rights and democracy in Russia, it is not only useless, but it mostly is mostly used to appease the constituency in European countries and North American countries, in North America. This is why the leaders of the European and North American countries are saying that. They have to make it clear for their own constituencies that we kind of worried. The real change is going to happen when the rhetoric changes from human rights, democracy, and blah blah to the real threat that is probably represented by Vladimir Putin. Because I actually do believe that there is a real threat. A real threat to the existence of some of the countries, well, at least in the Eastern Europe.
Are you referring to like historical examples here where a war can be a solution to an internal crisis?
Exactly. This is what I want to say. When there is a major internal crisis, a crisis in domestic politics, when there is a major loss of legitimacy, I think Putin will be really, really tempted to start a major war. And what he's doing now to Navalny is dangerous, not because this is a repression of democracy or human rights. Nobody really cares in the US or Germany about human rights of Russians, but because this is a real threat to the global order. He has threatened the world with the nuclear war already 2 times, if I'm not mistaken. And I think Well, it might be wise to take it seriously. He's not joking. This is not a joke. He actually lives in a horizon where he wants to defer this war, but I think he believes that it is totally unavoidable. And when he feels like he's existentially threatened from inside, perhaps, he will start this war. So this is a real threat. And I'm waiting for a change of rhetoric, probably for a change of leadership in the countries in Europe and North America, to realize. And that will be probably a kind of change in or turn in the global order. That I think is more important than this.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understood that. What change are you waiting for in rhetoric? From what to what?
From human rights and democracy to dealing with
Oh,
a real
dealing
threat
with
of
a
the nuclear
threat
war.
that is Putin's Russia.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
That's well, uh, you know, maybe we can do both. Professor Greg Yudin, it's been a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for informing the audience, and thank you for providing guidance to your students. I think it's wonderful. My guest today was Professor Greg Yudin of Moscow Higher School of Social and Economic Sciences. Thank you so much for being on the program. Thank you for
Thank you.
watching Rashkin Report. And until we meet again, remember to subscribe. And thanks to everyone who